Ciao tutti, welcome to the Paddock Pass podcast from the Autodromo del Mugello on Sunday evening. We're standing around our favourite bin, David and Neil, while we record this podcast. We're going to chew over some of the topics from today. Let's have a quick rundown of what happened today. Of course, Pecco Bagnaia doing the hat-trick. 3 in a row at Mugello, and, you know, with a bigger crowd.
Or five in a row, depending on how you count it, because he's also won both sprints.
Indeed, Dave. It's quite a streak of success. Another win for Ducati, and we think of some of the Ducati winners here over the years: Jorge Lorenzo, Danilo Petrucci, and Andrea Dovizioso. There's quite a storied recent past for the iconic Italian Marc. Of course, Enea Bastianini providing the thrills in what was quite a sparse main race, I'd say. We'll get onto that a little bit later. And then, of course, the podium being rounded out by Jorge Martin, who had quite a face in Parc Ferme, but then kind of mellowed a little bit in the post-race hubbub when he realised that, you know, it wasn't actually such a bad result after all, after his struggles in the sprint, which I think he actually described as a crisis on Saturday. Of course, as ever, I'm Adam, and it's a pleasure to be joined by the man in the hat, Mr. David Emmett, and Neil Morrison. There we go. A quick grin to the camera for those people just watching us.
A grin from the bin.
Indeed. Listen, guys, let's get straight into our grades. We've been very effusive in recent weeks. 9s, 10s. Dave's even gone full tap.
12s.
11 and 12. Neil, what was your thoughts on this Grand Prix? What kind of number sticks in your mind?
I mean, we're recording this, 3 or 4 hours after the MotoGP race, so I'm going to go with a 5 just because I thought it was really boring and really quite dull and a massive letdown, really, because we had all the top guys in the championship, the 4 guys that are fighting for the championship in the top 4, all on track within a second and a half for the majority of the race, and it was just so low in action. It was, it was a bit like what we saw in Qatar, a bit like what we saw in Portimao, but without Pedro Acosta climbing up the order and getting amongst it to make it kind of interesting. So, yeah, like there was a lot to love about this weekend. Weather ended up being pretty good, decent attendance, good atmosphere, beautiful setting. But yeah, the MotoGP race, I find myself thinking this is really dull.
Well, Neil, one man's dull and boring is another man's fascinating. Where do you stand, Dave?
I'm going to give it a 4.
Oh, goodness.
It's even worse than Neil. It was extremely tedious. Everyone was going as fast as they could. And that was sort of, high 45s, low 46s. At one point when I was writing my notes about the race, taking notes during the race, I just had, the gap between Pecco and Jorge Martin was somewhere between 0.6, 0.8. The gap between Martin and Bastianini was 0.6 and 0.8, and the gap between Bastianini and Martin was 0.3 to 0.5, and it just stayed like that all the race. We had one good lap.
2.
The last lap. All right, 2 laps. Yeah, I'm prepared to give you 2 laps.
No, I'd say we had one good lap and 2 good moves.
Yeah, possibly.
First lap was good.
Yeah,
last lap was good.
Yeah. A couple of good overtakes, but apart from that, it was pretty dire and it was extremely dominant. But I mean, like, the atmosphere was great. There were a lot more people in the event. It really felt busier. It felt, it was getting back to pre-pandemic, heading towards the Rossi heyday sort of vibe, and more sedate though. It does feel, because like the certainly like the track invasion felt a lot more controlled and cultured. It felt like they weren't giving it the full Italian death or glory. I mean, like, I've seen people howling down the front with in one of those Ape 3-wheelers, attempting to kill everyone. So yeah, it was a bit more sedate.
Yeah, what you're trying to say is there were no burning effigies of Marc Marquez on the front straight this weekend, which you have to say is a positive.
Yeah, distinct lack of booing.
But on Saturday
they didn't. I mean, they didn't. They didn't have a chance here. There was plenty of booing on Saturday because he was on the podium, or on the whatever it is that they call it nowadays. But on Sunday, yeah, he finished 4th. There were 2 factory Ducatis, first and second, and the first Spaniard was in 3rd. So there was, not a lot for the Italians to not like.
Dave, were you making all these points and observations after I'd elbowed you in the ribs to wake up? during the race because, like you say, it was a stretch. I had the same emotion as you. I thought, this is a bit of a difficult watch. 23 laps, it starts to feel like 43. But then very quickly, you have to realize that we've had some amazing races so far in MotoGP this year. This is the 7th fixture of the season, and we've been really spoiled. So it's inevitable that we're going to get a race that's kind of strategic, is a little bit drawn out, is a little bit dictated to by tyres. And the further we go on in this 2024 season, the shift in the Michelin technology really seems to be upsetting the apple cart.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think one reason why I'm maybe being a bit harsh with the grid is just because we're in Mugello, and you come here and you expect to see fabulous racing. If we were at somewhere like near me a circuit where we have crap racing, I can't think of one off the top of my head because I had 4 hours sleep or 5 hours sleep last night.
Even like Circuit of the Americas.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, if it was a race like today in Austin, you would think, okay, well, that's just Austin. But I think the fact that we're here, where we're so used and so accustomed to great racing over the last, in history, since we've started coming here, the fact that it was a bit of a letdown was, I think, even more disappointing considering the setting.
Have we had really that many classic races in the past? I mean, we've had like duels and like pockets of action. Yeah, but maybe you're confusing the atmosphere with the...
No, pretty much all of Rossi's successes were epics.
Yeah, and when was that? When was the last time we won in Mugello?
What's that? Well, 2019, that was an epic.
Yeah, 2019 was an epic, and then before that?
I mean, 2014.
It was also because he's roared on by half of Italy. I mean, if it was somebody else winning, then you'd maybe think, okay, that was a race was all right.
It's a fair point, I guess. Yeah.
Yeah, I think also, I mean, like it is a bit emblematic of how MotoGP has changed. The aerodynamic has definitely changed the dynamics of overtaking here. The absolute dominance of Ducati has changed the racing here. The new Michelin has changed. I mean, the more we learn about it, the more races we see, the more we're starting to understand just how much the new Maria Michelin has changed racing.
I mean, did I say my grade? I think like 6.5 I was going to give it.
Yeah, so you didn't say your grade, but now you did.
Your furrowed brow tells more than words ever could add.
Absolutely. Incidentally, if there's the sound of deconstruct in the background, it's because we are, as we said, recording this in the paddock, and there is a degree of collapsing going on around us. Of course, MotoGP is sticking around for the one-day tests. So Dave and I will be back tomorrow. We'll try and do a short note show for our Patreon channel. So Paddock Insiders, you're going to have even more content on Monday evening. But there's quite a bit of activity going on as people get packed up. So I apologise if there is some general hubbub. Moments. Let's move on to our moments. I'll go first because I went last time. I just loved Bagnaia's move in turn 2. I mean, it was a statement right from the off. If I had to speculate, I'd say there was a fleck of fuck you in the way that he was handed the 3-place penalty. He didn't have to pay for it on Saturday during the sprint, but then, of course, he was on the second row of the grid. I mean, Pecco kind of made it sound like starting from that place was the back of the grid. I mean, I think maybe he should try swapping place with a Honda if he really wants to see what it's like to, have a bad slot on the grid. But I just thought it was a really gutsy move straight away, and it just led to a perfect performance from him. So, what was your moment, Dave?
My moment was every time Marquez came onto the back straight right behind Enea Bastianini. Because
that's 23 moments. You have to pick one. 19. No, because that was the point at which you really saw the disadvantage of the GP23 versus the GP24. Biggest change between them is the GP24 has more power, has more acceleration, and it was, you could see Marc really working really hard to try to catch the Bastianini, to get past him at the first corner so he could try and leave him. By the time he managed that, I think lap 19 or 17, 18, quite a long way into the race, then he'd already used up a lot of his tyres, just trying the same thing over and over and over again. And he just could not get close enough to try and make the move. And I think if he'd got a better start, it would have been a different race. And if Bagnaia had got a worse start, it would have been good. But I think, like, your moment was the absolute deciding moment of the race.
Dave, you kind of alluded to it there. This track was the ultimate difference between the GP23 and 24, right? Because the 23 riders none of them really figured, to be a level of competitiveness that we saw from the other Ducatis.
No, I mean, if you look at it, the 3 of the GP24s finished first, second and third on the podium, and then the 4th GP24 finished in 6th. Franco Morbidelli putting in another sterling ride, did really, really well, did well yesterday as well. After Marc Marquez, the next GB23 is Fabio Di Giannantonio, who again also had a good race, coming from quite a long way back. From what was it, 14th, 15th, that sort of place. But he was basically 8 seconds behind Marquez. So that's the kind of difference that it is.
Yeah, we've had some listeners and also people following us on Patreon asking us about the differences between the 23 and the 24. So, guys, watch the Grand Prix here, and you'll maybe see a very visual example of it. But Neil, just before I ask you for your moment of the Grand Prix, I want to remind you, if you head to renthal.com, if you had a street bike, you'd find some very fine accessories there to our listeners who are looking to upgrade certain elements of their motorcycles. Just go to renthal.com. You'll find some really high-class, premium stuff, good prices, and it's definitely a one-stop shop for, just some little trinkets that need to upgrade your ride. But, what stood out for you from today, or from the weekend even?
A quick mention for the final lap of the Moto2 race. That was the best race of the day. Joe Roberts and Alonso Lopez had a great last lap scrap. Joe Roberts made a nice kind of Bagnaia-esque move into turn 2 to eventually clinch that race. But, I mean, the MotoGP race was so short an incident that I'll have to plump for the pretty obvious one, which was Bastianini's last corner pass on Jorge Martin, because it was quite unconventional. I think it was quite on the hoof. He wasn't really planning it, but suddenly Martin just left the door open. He called it a rookie mistake rather, and just left way too much space for Bastianini, who was so much faster at that point in the race than Martin, to kind of dive under. And it was a great move, and it was another instance when Bastianini looked like he had no peers. Bastianini had no one that was superior than him on the final lap or the final 2 laps. Great move to clinch second place.
Do you think that the Moto2, because obviously the Moto2 was shortened because of their Moto3 race ended up red flagged. Thubuthureta, I think is the champ's name.
Zuratutha.
Was hurt. He's actually okay. He was crashed, but they had to red flag it. They had to stop it. They had to restart the Moto3 race, and then that meant that they shortened the Moto2 race to 12 laps. Do you think that had a big impact over on the race or not?
I think so. Yeah, it just became like a bit of a sprint brawl, didn't it? It was 12 laps.
Yeah.
And I think Roberts probably had a bit more of an advantage on the rest over full race distance. So the fact that it was shortened down meant that everyone was kind of up there getting involved. So yeah, it was pretty entertaining.
Sympathy for the Moto2 guys. They seem to be the whipping boys when it comes to timetable changes. I mean, Sam Lowes was telling us repeatedly about this last year as well, and it's just an unfortunate thing. But Joe Roberts was over the moon, Neil. I mean, the real show of emotion. I was saying to you, Dave, it's actually refreshing to hear an American voice in part Ferme being interviewed, because it makes you realise it's an ingredient of Grand Prix that we kind of really need. We need that diversity.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been hearing things this weekend about it was looking a bit difficult for Joe Roberts to move up to MotoGP next year previously, but things are starting to look up, and I think there is a solid chance that we could have an American back in MotoGP.
Perfectly timed win as well. I mean, lots of decisions are going to get made in this next 3-week kind of break before Assen, and Joe's just signed off this first part of the season before spring break, as we've been calling it all weekend, with a brilliant performance and his first victory in 2 years.
Yeah, it's not an unusual sight. I mean, we've seen them in a few Grand Prix, but there was a lot of managers and agents in the paddock this weekend, and with the double header, this being the second Grand Prix in a week, of course, there's plenty of activity going on, plenty of talks happening, and we've already seen one announcement, of course, with Pedro Acosta signing his new 2-year deal. Not officially confirmed as 2-year, but that's what we're guessing at least. And there's going to be more coming, that's for sure. We have to. I mean, one thing we'll get on later about the subject of Ducati and who's going to be going there, but I just want to wrap up the subject on Joe Roberts now by asking you, he's now up to second in the World Championship, I believe, or second or third. He's the closest challenger to Sergio Garcia at the moment. Fermin Aldeguer having another anonymous Grand Prix. Can we realistically look at Roberts and think okay, I mean, he's going to push for the title because he's blown so hot and cold over the last few years.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, he's been pretty consistent aside from Barcelona, Qatar. He's been fighting for the podium all of the other 5 Grand Prix that we've had. 4 podiums, I think, from those races. So, yeah, you would have to say. So it's been a strange start to the year. There's definitely been a couple of names that have surprised us by stepping up. A couple of names that I expected to be leading the championship by now, not. Aldeguer being chief among them. So, yeah, I think results will continue to be weird. I think a lot of people have said as the year goes on, some of the riders currently struggling will definitely get stronger. You expect Aldeguer to come good, Arbolino, riders like this. But yeah, I think Roberts is in it for the long haul.
Well, Joe Roberts, of course, is one of the very few American riders in MotoGP, and Fly Racing is an American company and a great backer of the podcast. If you're looking for off-road gear or even just some street stuff, they have some jackets, gloves, and lots of things for riding on the road. Then head to flyracing.com and have a quick look. Dave, Pecco Bagnaia won the Grand Prix, and he did it in blue. As you and I like to swap cynical remarks on attempts at livery that tend to miss rather than hit most of the time. What did we think of the blue?
I mean, if it wasn't a Ducati, I would have said that looks really nice, because seeing a blue Ducati was just so weird. I think the much nicer touch was all of the engineers having their names across the back of their shirt. Seeing people, wandering around with Delinia and Gabarini on the back was absolutely class. I really, really liked that. I thought that was a really nice touch. But yeah, I mean, it looked pretty. It was just genuinely so weird. Like, Ducatis are supposed to be red, and on certain occasions they can be yellow, but blue is just weird. It was done obviously because the Ducati were saying we regard ourselves as Italy's team. That's why they have 2 Italian riders, Italian bike, Italian world champion, Italian engineers. So yeah, they were warming up for the Olympics and the some kind of football competition, which I believe is going to be happening later on.
You must have been eavesdropping on my little catch-up with Davide Tardozzi, Dave, because he was pretty much explaining the same thing. I managed to grab him just between sort of champagne celebrations, you can say, in the paddock this evening, and here is what the Ducati Lenovo factory team boss had to say about his Sunday. Davide, thank you for joining us on the podcast. I understand you've lost your voice a little bit, but it's not really a big surprise. The first question I have for you is, how does it feel having this success but not having a red bike on the podium?
No, it's just something that we did for the 2 of June, and in Italy is a very important day, while we feel to be the national team of 2 wheels, so it will be the European Soccer Games, it will be the Olympic Games in Paris, so we like to feel a national team, and that's why in Mugello we would like to be blue.
It was a fantastic day for the team. Pecco going 3 in a row, what a performance, but also Enea as well. I mean, that was drama at the end of a race that was quite strategic, quite formulaic.
Yeah, I think that the guys give us really a thrilling end of the race. I think that not even the best rider can have had a final lap like it was. So the 2 riders give us an enormous satisfaction. So we think that Pecco rode in a proper way, like a champion. He was slowing down, then pushing, managing the tire, while Enea, in the end, he did something fantastic. He's a very talented guy, and sometimes he shows us. And today, it was the day. I think that 1 and 2 in Mugello, in this special day for us, is something that it was a dream that became reality.
Davide, how do you see Pecco at the moment? Because there were a couple of DNFs, a couple of mistakes early this season, but now what a great period of form.
Pecco is carrying the number 1 since 2 years, so I guess that he deserves this kind of race. I think that he is a champion, and sometimes he makes mistakes, but no doubt about his talent and the number 1 he has on the ferry. So he is our leader, our champion, and I think that he will give us other satisfaction, other incredible races in the future. So the championship is open, but is open between Ducatis, and I guess that these make us very proud as Ducati people, and also the people in the factory.
Lastly, can I just ask you, because you've seen Lorenzo win here, you've seen Petrucci win here, Dovizioso, there's been a great deal of passion from the fans, but now, with this latest success for Pecco and the team, how is it still the same emotion for you?
Yeah, when we win, every rider that is coming and sitting in this garage and sitting on the red chairs is our son, and every rider that come here at least win races. So I think that the team is doing a good job, and I guess that Pecco, again, I want to underline, it will give us other satisfaction in the next future.
Lastly, is there much work tomorrow?
Already focus for the future. So tomorrow, not so many things to test, but just a few small things that we would like to test for Assen and Sachsenring. Then we'll see what is in the draw in Borgo Panigale. Our engineers always give us some surprise, so why not in the future to have something better to improve the bike.
Thank you for your time. I hope the beers help the voice for tomorrow.
I will, because tonight we need to have really nice beers.
Neil, this morning, Dave kind of laid his appendage on the table in a big way. He didn't do it on Patreon or on Discord, but he did it in our group, and on the side was tattooed Marquez. He was very determined that this was going to be a Marquez whitewash. You predicted Pecco Bagnaia will win the Grand Prix yesterday, and I also leant more towards the world champion. And I'm happy to say you and I were proved right, because Marc wasn't even in Part Ferme, wasn't even on the podium. Sorry, Dave. Better luck next time.
I just wanted chaos. It just would have been so chaotic. It would have been, everything would have gone wrong, and I always like that when that happens.
Why was Pecco so good here, Neil? Is it just the GP24 previous form, or just the fact that this guy, it's one of his tracks?
Yeah, it is definitely one of his tracks. I think he's got a couple of them on the calendar where he just performs at a superlative kind of level. We talked about him winning the last 5 races here, including sprints. He probably should have won the last 6.
Moto 2? Has he got Moto 2 wins as well? Should check that out really before recording, but it's entirely possible.
Yeah, and it just this is kind of Ducati's test track as well. So the bike is just absolutely completely honed for this layout. And Bagnaia was just kind of saying that there's a lot of long kind of corners that turn back in themselves where he's able to exploit the best of his riding style. There's a couple of really heavy braking zones as well where he's super strong. And it seemed as though he was even more fired up by the fact that he was penalised on Friday for a kind of controversial incident where he was judged to have blocked Alex Marquez on the Spaniard's flying lap towards the end of practice, I think it was. Bagnaia, we know he's usually quite a sedate, concealed figure, but he was really laying into the FIM stewards yesterday after the sprint race. I think he called it a clown decision in Parc Ferme after he took the front row start, and you could just tell that really kind of riled him up. So it was like he had to just sort of assert himself a little bit more, and like we saw in Qatar, like we saw in Jerez, when he is not in an ideal starting position, he has this fantastic ability to start well and then just really go for it in the first couple of corners. And as Dave said previously, that really dictated the flow of the race. Once he got out front after turn 2, it was pretty much where he wants to be, and the pace that he was setting was quite astonishing. I think we mentioned, or maybe we didn't mention before, 25 seconds his race winning time was, faster than last year, which is an astonishing amount. And that pretty much explains why no one could get close to anyone, because everyone was just doing everything they possibly could to stay up with or keep up with them.
I mean, Maverick Vinales was saying I was 35 seconds faster than last year, and I'm still, what is it, something like
8th.
It's still 8th. Maverick Vinales was very interesting about the differences. The way that the Ducati have improved. It was always the Aprilia, which could carry the corner speed, which could, which is good on the change of directions. But this year's iteration of it is a bit. They've sacrificed a bit of that to get a bit more stability, whereas the Ducati have gone in the opposite direction. It is a bit more agile. It's a bit more. It's a bit better through the corner. It's better at carrying corner speed, especially the aerodynamic updates which they've made to the bike really helps it through those long corners, and that I think is where it's really made the biggest difference.
He's made a lot of inroads into the championship standings as well. I mean, he's cut down the points lead considerably for Jorge Martin. It's been an amazing week for Bagnaia, really, hasn't it? Catalunya was, of course, his nadir, let's say, for the last 2 years. Won that Grand Prix last weekend, and now here at home, he's done it again. It's almost a shame, really, that we entered like a 3-week hiatus now because he's on a run of form. Do we have to fear Bagnaia, guys? Is this the imperious form that we were worried about, maybe pre-season 2024?
I think... fear, I'm not sure I would say that, because I think he has 2, maybe even 3 rivals, the top 4 today, that are capable of beating him and capable of matching him when he, hits his stride. But yeah, I think we're seeing Pecco operating at a higher level this year than we did even last year. I mean, it was clear from Jerez that he was willing to sort of dig deep within himself to fend off Marc and Marc's challenge. And yeah, I think today was a bit of a statement because some of his previous races, I mean, Barcelona was all about managing the race the best, but this race was just about going absolutely hell for leather, flat chat from the start. And okay, won Qatar, the opening night of the season, but I think this was a race weekend when he just showed that, yeah, when I have to be the fastest, I can be the fastest over 23 laps.
Yeah, I mean, basically we're getting into the part of the season you can now say we're fully into the heart of the season, the guts of the season. People are finding their level. We're starting to find out where everyone really is. The factories are starting to get the advantage they have naturally, and we're starting to see amongst the riders, the goats being separated from the sheep. We're seeing Pecco Bagnaia catch up with Jorge Martin. It looks like certainly for the first part, shall we say, 2/3 of the season, it's going to be Martin versus Bagnaia, which is exactly what you expect. You sort of feel that Marquez is going to start catching up. You can see that Pedro Acosta gets better and better and better every race. At some point, he's going to join in the fun. The championship, but I mean, just going off what happened last year, you have to say that it is once again going to be between Pecco Bagnaia and Jorge Martin.
Neil, we're talking about timing with Joe Roberts winning in Moto2. Over the last week, Enea Bastianini's effectively lost his job. He's lost his contract with the factory Ducati team. Whether he gets on a GP25 somewhere else is, highly unlikely, would say. But then again, what a time to produce a performance like this. And we kind of suspected Bastianini was capable of it because he has that ability just to stretch that tyre life all the way to the end. Yeah,
again, he showed today just he really is kind of on his own when it comes to the final couple of laps and his ability to produce that late race attack. You could maybe say that he would have produced something similar in the sprint race had he not sort of been nerfed, or maybe nerfed is too strong a verb, pushed off by Jorge Martin in what was a racing incident at turn 1 in the sprint. But yeah, there were definitely moments in that race, weren't there, when he was struggling to keep up with the top 2 and Marc was all over him, and you thought, okay, once Marc made the pass into turn 1, it was, I think, that was it for Bastianini. His podium hopes were gone, but the way he responded to Marc, great overtake down into Scarperia at turn 10, great late race attack as well, and as you said, very timely. I was having a thought today, Bastianini 4th in the championship, not that far away from Marc behind. It was a bit boneheaded what he did in Barcelona, wasn't it? Like, he's a championship contender.
Yeah. He was
trying to, give a middle finger to the FIM stewards, but those were decent points that he chucked away just by a kind of moment of rage, right? And I don't think you would have had Pecco Bagnaia or Jorge Martin doing something like that, because that's kind of hamstrung him.
It's not that it matters to a great deal of people, but we know that Bastianini's 2 flaws, if you like, are one, perhaps a little bit less intelligence compared to some of his peers, and also a lack of marketability, because the level of English, the character that comes across, when he's not delivering the results, there's not a great deal of value there. So maybe Ducati are looking at more possibilities. I mean, Jorge Martin has a bit more sheen, a little bit more sass. And of course, he's the number one rider in the world in terms of leading the standings and bringing the results at the moment. But I don't know, Dave, has Bastianini timed this to perfection, do you think, or is it a little bit too late?
It's too little too late. I mean, all of the news or all of the gossip, all of the rumours, all of the very well-informed journalists were saying that Martin has got the second seat. Bastianini is going to be out. Bastianini presumably either Aprilia or possibly Pramac. Do we think? Yeah. It's again typical Bastianini move. Too little, he's amazing, but he does it at the wrong time. He doesn't have the intelligence, and I think your point about him not taking the long lap penalty, whether it was justified or not, he would have finished a lot further up the field and had much better chance if he'd have just taken that first long lap penalty and served it and carried on.
Well, the results and the form and the riding certainly doesn't harm his chances if there are team bosses or factories out there thinking, do we take a chance or not? So.
Yeah, just a quick thing on, before we finish up on Bastianini. What we saw today was the rider I think we were all expecting him to be when he joined the factory team last year. And obviously we all know what happened last year, and injury and lack of ability to get acclimatized to the GP23. But that was the rider that was kind of terrorizing Bagnaia frequently towards the tail end of 2022, and the one that we really thought was going to cause Bagnaia so many headaches, and it just hasn't really panned out that way. But I still think that we have to count on him in the championship race. I don't think he's maybe quite as consistent as the top three, but I think there is a chance that it could just click for him. And he has had a couple of pieces of bad luck, like qualifying Le Mans. If he qualified well there, he would have won the race, I think. And a few things have just worked against him. I still think we have to count him in the general championship
He's
picture.
going to be a great satellite rider.
Yeah, exactly.
Fantastic value as a satellite rider, because he's there are going to be multiple days a year where he's going to be absolutely fantastic, look like he deserved a factory ride. But if you give him a factory ride, he doesn't seem to thrive in that environment.
Yeah, unfortunately, we can't have a Grand Prix in Sepang every week. So there we go. Dave, speaking of GP23 and championship contention, you were convinced about Marc Marquez. Yeah. He did everything right in qualifying. That was much better than we've seen for the last couple of Grand Prix, but it didn't work out in the Grand Prix. I mean, what was your take on the reason why, Marc was hounded by Enea and, really couldn't close up and do anything about Jorge Martin?
No, I mean, basically, he lost it at the start in the same way that Pecco won it at the start. Marc lost it at the start. He lost too many positions, gave himself too much work to do, ended up using too much of his tyre. Again, I mentioned it before. He's using too much. He's the advantage of the Ducati is, or the GP24 is the horsepower. He didn't have the horsepower. He's having to work a lot harder to try and catch up. You saw also that there was a little puff of smoke coming off the back of his bike every time coming through GP23 or coming through.
What did he say about that?
He didn't say about that, but our friend and colleague Thomas Bourgeard of GP Mag went down and talked to Frankie Carcetti, and Frankie told Tom that basically there's a bump just there, and they've got this ride height device set as low as possible, and so every single time it's just touching the tires through this bump, is just bottoming out. And it's causing a little bit of a blister. Yeah, exactly. But it tells you exactly how much on the limit is. He's having to take this line through this bump to try to get the drive, to try to make up, and it tells you exactly how much he's having to make up. Marc was interesting in saying that he goes into weekends with no expectations, because the one thing he learned is not to go in with expectations, because obviously he was asked about the Sachsenring, what's going to happen to the Sachsenring. He said, I don't know. I'm not going to go in there thinking I'm going to win. I'm not going to go in thinking I'm going to be terrible, because this is a completely different bike. It's a completely different approach. I'm having to take it literally one race at a time, turn up on Friday, see how it feels, see how it goes, and then take it from there. So again, he's learning every single time he goes out. He's understanding more about the bike. He's getting more and more complete. He's looking like a Ducati rider now. He's looking like Marc Marquez on a Ducati rather than Marc Marquez trying to ride a Honda, but someone has secretly sneaked into the garage and changed his bike. So, yeah, I mean, he's making progress, and I think at the end of the championship, he's going to be a real contender. Whether he's going to be able to win the championship or not, that's a different question. We shall have to wait and see. But he's going to be trouble for Bagnaia and Martin, and he's going to cause several upsets.
It's a great observation because it's coming.
Yeah.
I mean, he couldn't take Ducati's 93rd win here at Mugello, but it is definitely coming.
Yeah, just about that, because I actually, this morning, after waking up far too early, what I did was I sat down and went through all of the wins because there's the Casey taking the 27th. I didn't go back that far, but I did go back far to Ducati's 60th win, and their 60th win was in 2022. And their 92nd win, this was their 93rd win, but that's because when you start to look at what they're doing, 2022 they won 12 races. In 2023 they won 17 races. So far they've won 6 out of 7. When you're racking up those sort of numbers, then at a certain point, just by sheer coincidence, the rider who is winning a lot is going to their race number is going to match up. Someone pointed out to me that Alex Marquez didn't get the 73rd win after Marco Bezzecchi because Alex Marquez hasn't been winning on the Ducati. At that point in time, Marco Bezzecchi, I think he won 3 races that season. So yeah, it was the odds of it happening are very, very high.
Were you looking all this up when you arrived just 10 minutes before Moto3 this morning, or was this the reason you were working till 3:30 a.m.
No. It was this morning as I was having my breakfast and a second cup of coffee and watching watching MotoGP warm up from our magnificent mountain chateau.
On the podcast, we're also backed by KTM. Thanks ever so much to the guys in Austria. And Pedro Acosta, Neil, top 5. He was the first non-Ducati bike through. And a pretty static race. I mean, in typical Pedro style, I mean, it was a decent result, I think, for a rookie at Mugello, but he just didn't really seem particularly satisfied. And, yeah, that's indicative of the rivals for the Bologna factory at the moment because they're sort of stuck in a place where they can't push any further. Yeah,
exactly. I think Pedro called it one of the most boring races of his life. I think he was genuinely of the opinion that he could fight for the podium today, replicate what he did in the sprint on Saturday. But just didn't quite have, as you say, the kind of the strength or the kind of the rear grip that he was talking about off the Ducatis. And yeah, at one point it looked like he was a wee bit under threat from Franco Morbidelli, but maybe a third into the race it became clear that he had nothing for the top 4. Still though, a pretty magnificent performance. Had it not been for the kind of fact that he was fighting for victories at the last 2 Grand Prix, we would be saying what a performance from the rookie to be this close to the front at a track which is clearly not suited to the KTM. He's the top non-Ducati rider. In fact, he's the only non-Ducati rider in the top 7?
Until Maverick 7, in 8th.
Yep.
Yeah, and he's fifth in the championship as well now, I think.
Yeah, 5th in the championship. And quick bit of mental arithmetic tells me he was 8 seconds faster than the next best KTM. So, I mean, all things told, pretty remarkable. I did catch up with his crew chief, Paul Trevathan, just after the race. We can hear from him in a little bit. But, Paul had, I wouldn't say a face like thunder, but it was like... the mood with him was like, yeah, it's been a really bad day at the office. And afterwards I was like, mate, it shows you just how far you've come that 5th in his 7th race is a bad day at the office.
I mean, basically, you may or may not be familiar with this thing called the Overton window, where you want to shift the focus of the conversation by moving to one extreme. And Pedro Acosta has really shifted the Overton window because we are talking about him being disappointed in only being 5th and and losing touch. Hello, he's a rookie. This was his 7th Grand Prix. And he is, as you say, 8 seconds ahead of the rest, and he's the only KTM rider who can manage this rear tyre, which is really causing them problems. The other KTM riders basically just had nothing at all. Brad Binder, Jack Miller, very, very disappointing. Disappointing and disappointed with their own performance at not being able to be fast. So, yeah, he's completely changed the conversation.
Arguably, that's the factory team with the most to do tomorrow to try and work out this conundrum, because Jack Miller had vibration issues all through the weekend. Limited, I think he finished 16th. Or Paul Espargaro was 16th as well. Paul was running, obviously, an altered configuration of the RC16. He said he didn't have that much of an issue. So it'd be interesting to see. I assume the Australian and the South African might jump on a version of his bike tomorrow to give it a run here at Mugello. And Brad Binder as well, Dave. Just since the new Michelin tech, as we said earlier, has come in, the South Africans have struggled for the same level of feeling that he had at the beginning of the year. And Augusto Fernandez, incidentally, the fourth rider in that group, had a broken rear fender. So his race was over just due to some freak technical issue, which, can happen. But ironically, he had made some setting changes on the bike, which was suiting him in the first 3 or 4 laps of the race. So it was a bit of a shame that the Spaniard, who is already talking about his future, and he's working on the assumption that he's not going to be riding for the Tech 3 squad next year. Seems to be in a bit of a better place. But, as you said, you spoke with Paul, and, this was a little bit of, I think, the subject of your chat, right?
This was.
So let's just hear what the New Zealander had to say to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's a little bit hard to understand completely, and it's a lot about, the new tyre spec is definitely different on the rear. So there is, as you know from other manufacturers also, there's vibration issues. This is clear. Sure, what triggers it, on some tracks we have nothing, some tracks you have some, and different riding styles. So the big part is also how the guys are riding the bike, and where you suffer from it. So, inside our camp, of course, Pedro's doing the best of everyone. And I have to be honest, he's not suffering so much. He has some of course, but I would say controllable. And other guys seem to be suffering more and different from track to track. So it's a bit hard to get your head around it. And we, of course, as a company, you're working super hard on this, like everyone, trying to understand it and trying to get the maximum out of the tire. The tire has more grip. So clearly you have to try to use this grip in the correct way. Yeah. So it's about trying to get the maximum out of the tyre. So a little curveball with the new compound working so different. Yeah. And it's just trying to get the balance of the bike around again, Yeah. And because it's not constant, then it's always hard to, sometimes you have, sometimes you don't. One time you do a manoeuvre and it happens, one time's not. So it's quite tricky to really just pinpoint and work your way out of it,
Yeah. Because Michelin said that it wasn't a big difference in the rear tyre this year.
Yeah.
It turns out that when you look at race times, it's clear that there is.
Exactly. Yeah. What are we? 10 seconds faster in the sprint or 11 seconds?
25 today.
Yeah. So it's a little bit hard to get that out of a bike, So the tyres are clearly different, but I think it surprised everybody. And I think the lap times are coming down more because you start to understand it better, you start to use it better. So I don't think they expected the difference to be that big, but it's clearly a big part of it is the tyre for sure. Yeah.
The way that Pedro hangs off the bike, is that kind of how he's? Obviously.
Yeah, there's many elements, mate. It's also, how the guy gets on throttle, how he brakes, does he use rear brake, does he, it's all the elements that you charge and how you're loading the bike. You load it more on the rear, you load it the setting, the base setting, the way the guy likes his base bike. So the problem is you get it, you might find a direction, but then the guy doesn't particularly like the bike like that. So then he has to either change his style to get around it, or we try to find another way to fix it. So it's a big vicious circle, and it's something that we're working super hard on. Yeah.
Good to hear from Paul there. Always great to have him on the podcast. It'd be nice to get him on more regularly, actually. And as we say, Pedro Acosta's slightly skewed view on his rookie season. Maybe we'll have some more highlights that we can chat about later in the year. Guys, let's move straight on to our winners and losers. Dave, who stood out for you?
I'm going to be as boring as it is imaginable to be, and that is Pecco Bagnaia, because it wasn't a perfect weekend because he only qualified in second, and he did pick up a penalty. But he led from the off yesterday. He had a truly brilliant first lap. First 3 corners, I suppose, and took the lead, managed the race, just laid down a pace that no one else could manage. It was just an absolutely peerless performance.
It was the kiss celebration that really caused you to pick him for the winner, wasn't it, Dave?
Do you know what? I really did. I actually found myself Googling which guitar he bought, and it was just a cheapie. It was one of these sort of like 50 euro jobbies. So there was I felt a touch of satisfaction. I felt it could at least have sprung for a proper Stratocaster or something. Nice little sunburst number.
Was there any truth to the rumour that you were found in the bathroom later sticking your tongue out of yourself in the mirror?
Doing air guitar as well.
And doing my makeup, yeah.
Well, listen, Dave, I'm going to dovetail with your call and to say Ducati, just for the sort of Ducati festival vibe that was here. And as Neil mentioned, there was, and on our note shows as well. I mean, if you go back and listen to those in the background, you can hear that there was a certain amount of vibrancy back at Mugello this year, which was great to see. And obviously, most of the people turning up to see the glut of Italian riders doing so well in the championship at the moment. So, blue livery, party, success, and it's very much like Ducati's home, even though other brands use this circuit to test. So I'll say Ducati. Neil, who was your winner?
It does sound a bit weird, but I'm going to go with Jorge Martin. Hear me out. Hear me out here. I think Saturday was bad. It was a disaster, and I thought he was maybe trying to do a bit too much when he should have probably accepted his limitations. Wasn't feeling super comfortable with the front tyre on Saturday, yet he was really trying to push to keep Marc Marquez behind him. Crashed out, lost 9 potential really important points. And yes, he only finished third. Did a schoolboy error at the final turn, leaving the door open.
Sounding like a loser now.
However, I think the way he reacted from the disappointment of Saturday was actually really impressive. And if you rewind back to before Bastianini's late charge, I think 3 laps from the flag, Martin was actually within 0.2 of Bagnaia. Like, he got the lead right the way down. And yes, okay, maybe just burnt up his tyres a little bit too much in that late push, which you could say, again, unwise. But I think for him to do that at Mugello after such a bad Saturday was a really strong reaction and showed that this guy can bounce back from mistakes and disappointments. So, yeah, I thought Martin actually had a really, really strong Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, that's a strong shout. I mean, I do say that you win your championships on your bad days when you can pull yourself back from. Saturday was exactly the wrong thing to do. Sunday was exactly the right thing to do. I think he did burn up his tyres. I was looking at his times, and he was doing 46.3s to really start to catch Pecco, and then the laps after that he's doing 47s, and that was why Bastianini got by. I mean, it was a brilliant move from Bastianini, but Martin just had no tyre left.
Just before we move on to losers, and maybe I'm thinking of myself here coming into the loser category, but let's have a quick revision of the Alpinestars Paddock Podcast Fantasy League. Dave, you made a bit of a curious choice.
I did.
And we'll go over this on the Wednesday show, perhaps in a bit more detail, because I know Steve English will, have a look into the points, and he does like to brag about his newfound proficiency in picking the right rider. But you made a bit of a howler, Dave.
I did make it. Well, I mean, I did make a complete howler because I found myself without the funds to swap Pecco Bagnaia out of my team. So that was good. I was left with him. I swapped Fabio Di Gianantonio in. That was good.
Yeah.
I swapped Alex Rins in. That was perhaps not so good. And I swapped Franco Morbidelli out, which was also not exactly genius. Swapped Alicia Spargaro out. That was, that made sort of sense. I don't think I actually suffered there, but putting Rinzi in was turned out not to be the stroke of genius that I thought it would be.
Well, for me, apart from having Pecco, it was kind of mediocre across the board because I still have Digia, I still have Maverick, which I did not boost this year, this week.
I should have boosted. I mean, I'm just kicking myself. I didn't boost Pecco.
I might do it in Assen. Maverick's always been good at Assen. He might be on it there. We'll have to see after Friday. And Pedro as well. And as we've explained before, his situation. So maybe I'm not quite the loser, but I suspect from us four that I'm disgustingly bad once again. Neil, how do you get on?
I'm still floundering in 950th position, so...
Yeah, but yesterday you had a great day. Shame it was for the sprint.
In the sprint, yeah. Can we move on?
Listen, my loser, I'm going to pick Ducati again. Why? Because this was the weekend where things, became pretty excitable and dramatic about their lineup for next year. It's all very obfuscated about what they're going to do with their teams, their riders, and it looks very much likely we're going to see 2 less GP red bikes on the grid next year. So I think. Well, I mean, you'd assume there's going to be 2 Yamahas. I mean, is Pramac going to take the...
I'm not sure.
That's my point. It's chaos, and Ducati management, they're all here, of course, celebrating victory. But I think in the next few days, they've got some hard budget decisions and hard strategic decisions to make. So, that was my attempt at a loss. Who was your loser, Dave?
Well, I mean, mine is sort of parallel to yours. Mine is MotoGP because, as I was saying, 2022, 12 Ducati wins. 2023, 17 Ducati wins. Now 6 wins out of 7. I haven't even looked at the sprint wins, but they must have won a lot of the sprint wins. Because Martinez just cleaned up in the sprints. Haven't looked at the podiums. They must have cleaned up in podiums as well. It's Ducati have done a fantastic job. They deserve all of this success, but it's a bad look for the championship because it's making everyone else things very, very difficult for everyone else. They are. You don't want dominance in a championship. What you want is a bit of variety, and we haven't got enough variety in the manufacturers.
Neil?
Yamaha is my loser of the weekend, just because on Friday there seemed to be a hint of promise. They had obviously tested here recently along with Honda. Alex Rins was second at the end of practice with a barnstorming lap. But then, as Dave kind of previously mentioned, Rins just didn't have a good time. Managed to score a point for 15th, but Fabio Quartararo down in 18th. I mean, this used to be one of the great Yamaha tracks, and I think Fabio produced maybe his best ever ride here 2 years ago, when I remember he just was heroic around the kind of twisty bits, losing so much ground on the main straight. He was saying, in fact, both the riders were saying that with this new aero package, the bike has just become so heavy to flick from left to right through the kind of high-speed chicanes here. Fabio was saying his arms were just completely shattered, getting a bit of arm pump. And yeah, he wasn't really sure what he could do because he's had 2 separate surgeries on his right arm, I think, for arm pump, most notably after his Jerez incident in 2021 when he was leading the race by a mile and then, started losing feeling in his arm. It did seem, a lot of the talk coming into this weekend was like, yeah, we're on the right track, we're making big strides, we're happy with how things are going, but I think this is another bit of a reality check, and pretty horrible results, really, all things told. Yeah,
they've sacrificed their strong point to gain a lot of top speed, and they've really, really paid the price.
Yeah, just takes us back a bit to what Cal Crutchlow was saying at the end of last year. Yamaha just need to forget the aero and concentrate on what their strong points are, having a really rideable, manageable, agile machine with a bit better punch off the turns, a bit more mechanical grip, and that's what's needed.
Yeah, it says something that was one of the slowest bikes, but apart from the Ducati, it's the winningest bike here in over 10 years. So, but no, not anymore, unfortunately. It was a blue bike of a different kind that proved victorious here at Mugello. We hope you enjoyed our race reaction. We'll be back during the week for the next installment of the Paddock Pass podcast. As always, message us through Patreon if you're a Patreon subscriber and a Paddock Insider, or just send us a message on Twitter. We'll try to answer and we'll try to get your questions answered. Dave, as we mentioned, we'll be doing a quick show, just rounding up the test here tomorrow evening. We're off to finish work, try and grab our last pizza of the stint here in Italy, and then, we'll be back during the week with more Paddock Pass podcast goodness for you. Thanks for listening.